What happens when a beautiful woman must embark on a magical journey to save her marriage, with a clay pot as her only guide? The morning sun cast long shadows across the village of Ekiti, where tradition hung as thick as the morning mist. Omolola stood in her small kitchen, her hands trembling as she attempted to prepare breakfast for Adewale. The clay pot before her seemed to mock her efforts, its smooth surface a stark contrast to her clumsy movements. She had been married for 6 months, and each meal was a battlefield where her inexperience fought against her deepest desires to be a good wife. Adewale's footsteps approached, and Omolola's heart raced. She knew he would say nothing, but the disappointment in his eyes would speak volumes. The burnt yams lay charred at the edge of the fire, and the stew looked more like muddy water than the rich, flavorful dish her mother used to prepare. Her mother had tried to teach her, but Omolola had always been more interested in storytelling, in weaving tales that made the village children's eyes sparkle with wonder, than in learning the intricate art of cooking. The riverbank was never a place of peace for Omolola anymore. Where once she had laughed and shared stories with the other women, now she felt their judging eyes and heard their not-so-subtle whispers. "Look at Adewale," they would say, just loud enough for her to hear. "Such a hard-working man, and his wife cannot even prepare a simple meal." The women's baskets swung with rhythmic mockery, their clay water jugs balanced perfectly on their heads, a skill that seemed to elude Omolola in every aspect of her life. Her mother-in-law's visits had become less frequent, her disapproval growing with each failed attempt at homemaking. The village elders spoke in hushed tones about how a woman's worth was measured by her ability to nurture her home, to feed her husband, to maintain the delicate balance of family and tradition. Omolola felt the weight of these expectations crushing her spirit, making her feel smaller with each passing day. Her beautiful storytelling, once celebrated, now seemed like a useless skill in the face of her domestic failures. Omolola lived in a small village with lots of trees and hills. She was beautiful and loved telling stories to children. But there was one big problem: she could not cook. Every time she tried to make food, something went wrong. The yams would burn. The soup would taste bad. Her husband Adewale was kind, but he was always hungry. Adewale was a farmer who worked hard in the fields every day. He would come home tired and hope for a good meal. But Omolola's cooking always made him sad. She felt bad because she wanted to make him happy. She knew that in their village, women were supposed to be good at cooking. But no matter how hard she tried, her food always turned out wrong. The village women liked to talk. When they went to the river to get water, they would whisper about Omolola. "Look at her," they would say. "She can't cook anything good for her husband." Their words were like sharp stones that hurt Omolola's feelings. She felt small and embarrassed. Her mother-in-law stopped visiting so often. The village elders would shake their heads when they saw her. They believed a woman who cannot cook is not a good wife. Omolola loved telling stories, but now her stories did not matter. All anyone could see was her bad cooking. She wanted to learn, but she did not know how. Adewale loved Omolola, but he was getting tired of eating burnt food. His stomach always felt empty. In their village, a good wife was supposed to feed her husband well. His friends laughed at him. "How can a strong farmer like you be so skinny?" they would tease. At night, he would look at Omolola and see how much she tried. But trying was not the same as cooking. One day, Adewale talked to his best friend Kofi. "I love Omolola," he said. "But I need good food too." Kofi knew many women in the village who could cook very well. He suggested that Adewale might need to marry another wife who could prepare meals. In their village, men sometimes had more than one wife, and this was not strange to anyone. Omolola heard the rumors first. Her friends at the river told her that Adewale was looking at other women. "He wants a wife who can cook," they said. Their words were like sharp needles in her heart. She loved Adewale more than anything. The thought of losing him made her cry many nights. Her mother-in-law was the one who spoke to her directly. If you cannot cook, she said, Adewale will find a woman who can. A man needs good food. A man needs a proper wife. Omolola felt small. She knew she was a good storyteller. She knew she loved Adewale with all her heart. But in their village, love was not enough. A wife must feed her husband. Adewale did not want to hurt Omolola. He loved her smile. He loved how she made children laugh with her stories. But a man needed to eat. He spoke to the village elder about finding another wife. The elder knew a young woman named Folktale who was an excellent cook. Folktale could make soup that made everyone's mouth water. She could roast yams that were golden and perfect. But something stopped Adewale. When he looked at Omolola, he saw her big brown eyes. He saw how hard she tried. He saw her love. He decided to give her one more chance. I will find someone to teach you, he told her one evening. But you must promise to learn. Omolola remembered the old woman who lived deep in the forest. Iya Agba was wise. People said she knew magic. People said she could solve any problem. Omolola decided she would find this woman. She would learn to cook, no matter what. She would keep her husband. She would show everyone in the village that she was more than just a bad cook. Early one morning, before the sun was high, Omolola packed a small bag. She wore her best wrapper and put on her strongest sandals. The forest was deep and dark, but she was not afraid. She was going to learn how to save her marriage. She was going to learn how to cook. The forest was not like the village. Trees stood tall like giants. Leaves whispered secrets. Omolola walked carefully, her feet making soft sounds on the ground. She had heard stories about Iya Agba since she was a little girl. Some people said she was a witch. Others said she was a healing woman. Omolola hoped she was someone who could help her learn to cook. The path was not easy. Roots tried to trip her. Branches reached out like hands. But Omolola was brave. She remembered the stories she told children about heroes who never gave up. She was going to be her own hero today. She would save her marriage. She would learn to cook. As the sun started to go down, Omolola saw a small hut. Smoke came from a tiny chimney. Chickens walked around the front. An old woman sat outside, cooking something that smelled wonderful. This must be Iya Agba. Her skin was dark and wrinkled like old leather. Her eyes were sharp and bright. I have been waiting for you, Iya Agba said before Omolola could speak. The old woman's voice was like soft thunder. You want to learn to cook, but cooking is more than just making food. Cooking is about taking care of your heart. Omolola was confused. She had come to learn how to make good soup, not to learn about hearts. Iya Agba gave Omolola a clay pot. It was not a special pot. It looked old and simple. This pot will teach you everything, the old woman said. Omolola wanted to laugh. How could a pot teach her to cook? But something in Iya Agba's eyes made her listen. Every day, you will clean this pot, Iya Agba explained. You will care for this pot like you care for your home. You will fill it with good thoughts. You will wash it with love. Omolola did not understand. But she was willing to try. She had nothing to lose and everything to gain. That night, Omolola stayed in Iya Agba's hut. The old woman taught her how to clean the pot. Not just wash it, but really clean it. She showed Omolola how to scrub carefully. How to rinse with clean water. How to dry it with a soft cloth. A clean pot is a happy pot, Iya Agba said. Omolola learned more than just cleaning. Iya Agba told her stories. Stories about women who became strong. Stories about families that stayed together. Stories about love that was more than just food. Each story was like a small lesson. Each word was like a drop of wisdom falling into Omolola's heart. Every morning, Omolola woke up early. She cleaned the clay pot just like Iya Agba taught her. She did not understand how cleaning a pot would help her cook, but she trusted the old woman. Her hands became gentle. Her movements became careful. She learned to pay attention to small things. Iya Agba watched her. Sometimes she smiled. Sometimes she said nothing. But Omolola could feel she was learning something important. It was not just about cooking. It was about patience. It was about caring. Iya Agba showed Omolola how to pick ingredients. A good cook knows her food, she said. They walked to the garden. Omolola learned to pick vegetables. She learned to smell herbs. She learned to touch plants and feel if they were fresh. Cooking starts before the fire, Iya Agba told her. Cooking starts with knowing what you are using. Omolola had never thought about food this way. Before, she just threw things into a pot. Now, she was learning to listen to the food. Back in the village, Adewale was losing hope. Where was Omolola? He heard she had gone to find Iya Agba. Some people said she would never return. Some said she was crazy. But Adewale remembered her smile. He remembered her stories. He missed her. He missed her laugh. Even though her cooking was bad, she was still his wife. He decided he would wait. He would give her a chance. Iya Agba taught Omolola how to make a fire. Not just any fire. A cooking fire. She learned how to arrange wood. She learned how to make the fire grow slowly. A good fire is like a good story, Iya Agba said. It must grow carefully. Omolola's hands were clumsy at first. The wood would not stay. The fire would go out. But she did not give up. She tried again and again. Each time, she learned something new. The day came when Iya Agba said Omolola could try to make soup. Her hands shook. Her heart beat fast. She remembered all the lessons. Clean pot. Good ingredients. Careful fire. Slow cooking. The first soup was not perfect. But it was better than anything she had made before. Iya Agba tasted it and nodded. You are learning, she said. Spices were a mystery to Omolola before meeting Iya Agba. Now, she learned that each spice told a story. Pepper was brave and strong. Ginger was warm like a grandmother's hug. Turmeric was golden and healing. Iya Agba showed her how to mix spices carefully, like telling a perfect story. Cooking is like making magic, the old woman explained. Each spice has a voice. You must listen to what they want to say in your food. Omolola closed her eyes and smelled the different spices. For the first time, she understood that cooking was an art, just like her storytelling. Not every day was perfect. One morning, Omolola burned an entire pot of beans. Tears came to her eyes. But Iya Agba did not get angry. Mistakes are teachers, she said softly. Every burned pot has a lesson. She showed Omolola how to clean the pot. How to understand what went wrong. Omolola learned that burning food was not a failure. It was a chance to learn. She started to see her past cooking mistakes differently. Each burned meal was not a shame. It was a step towards becoming better. A messenger came to Iya Agba's forest home. He brought news from the village. Adewale was asking about Omolola. He wanted to know if she was well. The messenger saw how Omolola had changed. Her hands were stronger. Her eyes were brighter. Iya Agba smiled. Your husband remembers your heart, she told Omolola. Not just your cooking pot. Omolola felt hope growing inside her. She missed Adewale. But she knew she was not ready to return until she truly learned. Water was another teacher for Omolola. Iya Agba showed her how water changed everything in cooking. How it could make food soft or hard. How it carried flavor. They walked to the river. Iya Agba taught her how to choose the best water. How to wash ingredients. Clean water is like a clean heart, Iya Agba said. It makes everything better. Omolola began to understand that cooking was about more than just food. It was about care. It was about love. Iya Agba began sharing old family recipes. These were not just instructions. They were stories passed down through generations. Each recipe had a history. Each dish told about the women who came before. Omolola learned her grandmother's soup recipe. She learned her mother's way of cutting vegetables. Cooking connects us to our family, Iya Agba explained. When you cook, you are not alone. You are with all the women who came before you. Omolola's hands became more sure. Her cuts were cleaner. Her fire was stronger. She could now make simple meals that smelled wonderful. Iya Agba would taste her food and sometimes just nod. Other times, she would give small advice. You are becoming a cook, Iya Agba said one day. But Omolola knew she was becoming much more than just a cook. She was becoming a woman who understood herself. News traveled slowly in the village. People began to hear about Omolola's time with Iya Agba. Some said she was learning magic. Some said she was becoming a different person. The women who once mocked her now became curious. Kofi, Adewale's friend, came to the forest. He wanted to see what was happening. He could not believe the change he heard about. Iya Agba declared that Omolola was ready to cook a full meal. Not just a simple soup. A meal with many dishes. Omolola was scared. But she was also excited. She remembered everything she had learned. Her hands did not shake anymore. She moved with purpose. She understood each ingredient. She knew how to listen to the food. Omolola realized that cooking was like storytelling. Each ingredient was a character. The fire was the story's energy. The pot was where the magic happened. She began to tell stories while she cooked. Her cooking became alive with imagination. Iya Agba watched and smiled. You are not just learning to cook, she said. You are learning to live. Omolola knew it was time to go home. She had learned so much. She was not the same woman who had left the village months ago. Her clay pot was full of wisdom. Her heart was full of hope. Are you ready? Iya Agba asked. Omolola looked at the forest that had been her home. She looked at the woman who had taught her everything. I am ready, she said. Omolola returned to her village. People were surprised. She walked differently. She carried herself with confidence. Her clay pot was always with her. She was not the same woman who had left months ago. Adewale saw her first. He could not believe his eyes. She looked stronger. She looked happier. Something was different about her. Omolola's first big meal for the village was like magic. She prepared a feast that made everyone's mouth water. The soup was rich and warm. The yams were golden and perfect. The meat was tender. People who once laughed at her now looked at her with respect. Adewale watched her, his eyes full of pride. The woman who could not cook before now fed the entire village. Children came for seconds. Old men praised her cooking. The village elders nodded with approval. Young women started coming to Omolola. They wanted to learn her secrets. But Omolola did not teach like other cooking teachers. She told stories. She shared wisdom. Cooking is about love, she would say. It is about caring for your family. She showed them how to choose ingredients. How to listen to the food. How to cook with their hearts, not just their hands. The women learned more than just cooking. They learned about life. Adewale was the happiest man in the village. His wife was now famous for her cooking. But more than that, she was happy. Her smile was bright. Her stories were full of life. He remembered how close he had been to finding another wife. Now, he understood that love was about more than just food. Love was about growing together. Love was about believing in each other. Omolola never forgot the clay pot from Iya Agba. It sat in a special place in her home. Sometimes, she would look at it and remember her journey. The pot was more than just a cooking tool. It was a memory of how she changed. Young women would ask about the pot. Omolola would smile and tell them its story. A story of patience. A story of hope. Omolola remembered how hard her own journey was. She started helping other women in the village who struggled with cooking. She was not harsh. She was kind. She understood that everyone learns differently. Some women learned quickly. Some took more time. But Omolola was patient with all of them. She remembered how Iya Agba had been patient with her. The whole village began to change. Women started seeing cooking as more than just a chore. They saw it as a way to show love. They saw it as a way to tell stories. Omolola had started a small revolution. The village became known for its wonderful food. But more than that, it became known for its strong, loving women. Iya Agba came to visit Omolola one last time. She was older now. Her steps were slow. But her eyes were still bright. She looked at everything Omolola had created. She saw the women Omolola had taught. "You have become more than I hoped," Iya Agba said. Her words were a blessing. Her words were a goodbye. Omolola began writing down her recipes. But they were more than just recipes. They were stories. They were lessons about life. She wanted future generations to know what she had learned. Her children would read these books. Her grandchildren would learn from them. Her wisdom would live on. With support from the village elders, Omolola started a small cooking school. It was not just about making food. It was about building confidence. It was about teaching women to believe in themselves. Young girls would come and learn. They would learn cooking. But they would also learn about life. Sometimes, Omolola would sit quietly and remember her early days. The times she burned food. The times she felt ashamed. Those memories were not painful anymore. They were lessons. She was grateful for her journey. Grateful for every mistake. Grateful for every lesson. Cooking became a way of healing in the village. When someone was sick, Omolola would cook special meals. When someone was sad, she would bring food. Food became more than nutrition. It became love. The village learned that feeding someone was about more than filling their stomach. It was about filling their heart. Omolola's daughters learned cooking differently. They learned with joy. They learned with confidence. They did not feel the shame she had felt. They saw cooking as a powerful skill. Her daughters would become teachers. They would continue her work. They would spread her wisdom. As years passed, Omolola became a respected elder. People came from other villages to hear her speak. To taste her food. To learn her wisdom. She had transformed from a woman who could not cook to a woman who fed not just bodies, but souls. Years later, Omolola became like Iya Agba. Young women would come to her. They would seek her wisdom. She would teach them that cooking was more than just making food. Cooking was about love. Cooking was about care. Her clay pot sat in the corner of her home. A reminder of where her journey began. A symbol of her transformation. Adewale would watch her and smile. The woman who could not cook had become the wisest cook in the village. But more than that, she had become wise in life. Thank you for always watching our video. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share our videos.